Hello everyone, today is June 4th, 2018, and in this episode we're going to conclude our three-part series on the deep state. So let's go ahead and jump right in. There is a trillion-dollar network of agencies and organizations that form a kind of cooperative matrix that functions outside of the constraints of our U.S. Constitution. And what it does is it works to control our elected government, the one that is supposed to be our legitimate government. And it controls the vast bureaucracies associated with that elected government. The fact that this matrix operates above and below the law, what that tells us is that we are now essentially living in a post-constitutional cryptocracy rather than the constitutional republic that our founding fathers formed. But really, to be more accurate, we really have two different systems of government that are operating at the same time. So we've got the constitutional system that we, the people, are compelled to live under. And then we have the cryptocratic system that the criminals who belong to the New World Order, that they live under. One or the other of these systems is going to fall. They cannot continue to work simultaneously because one undoes the other. And this battle that is being waged between the Rothschild Mafia behind the New World Order and the small faction of awakened, enlightened citizens, those who have woken up from the Matrix, that battle is quite frankly the most important fight in American history since the American Revolution. Now, let's talk about exactly how this works, some of the components in the deep state. The deep state includes, as I said before, the military-industrial complex, multinational defense contractors, U.S. intelligence. So let's introduce you to the U.S. Intelligence Committee. And I'm going to run through this rather quickly. It's a lot bigger than just the CIA. A lot of people think of just the CIA when we talk about the intelligence community. The fact is we have over 1,200 different intelligence agencies inside America. Now, of those, there are 17 that are our primary government agencies. Let's run through those. First of all, the most well-known is the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA is not supposed to be working inside the USA. They're supposed to be spying on foreign governments. But despite how it's supposed to work, the fact is the CIA maintains over 10,000 various sites within the homeland here. Now, outside of America, they do carry out coups against foreign nations. This is just one of their main things they do. It's not conspiracy. That's what the CIA does. They don't deny it. They coordinate covert operations such as funneling money and arms, heavy weaponry to opposition groups that are in different countries that are trying to overthrow their governments. The CIA funds that and arms them. CIA is dirty, dirty, dirty. They also, what they are not as quick to admit, but is true nonetheless, is that they engage in international drug trafficking, as well as human trafficking. Basically, if there's any large-scale money-making enterprise being run by a criminal network anywhere in the world, you can bet that the CIA has its hands in that honeypot and is making sure to get its cut of the money. It's because the CIA is a mafia, plain and simple. The Council on Foreign Relations, which is the Rothschild Roundtable group set up here in America, that is mostly responsible for the creation of the CIA. And the CIA has used Rothschild media outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times being the two most prominent ones to disseminate their propaganda and to try to shape the national dialogue, to control what we think and what we talk about. There's so much we could say about the CIA, but let's keep moving. Number two, we have the NSA, or the National Security Agency. This agency used to be kept secret from the American people. They are the most technologically sophisticated of the 17 agencies. These are the guys who monitor our phone calls, our social media posts. They monitor our private emails, keep logs of all that. All other forms of electronic communications. The NSA is the group that primarily monitors that. And they oversee a mass surveillance program called PRISM, PRISM. And that's the program that we know about because of Edward Snowden, who revealed it to the public back in 2013. So the CIA recruits killers, while the NSA recruits math nerds and computer programming whizzes. That's the main difference. All right, third agency, we have the domestic intelligence agency called the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI is supposed to help protect Americans from terrorism, from espionage, from cyber attacks and things like that. They maintain, though, a terrorist watch list, which includes many American citizens. Some of us may be on that. The FBI and the CIA have a major rivalry. They hate each other, and they usually don't like having to cooperate together on anything. Turf wars is really what it's about. Fourth agency is the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, which operates the Office of National Security Intelligence. The DEA is the agency charged with combating illegal drug manufacture and distribution inside the United States. This office within the DEA, the Office of National Security Intelligence, they coordinate the DEA's work with the various state and local law enforcement agencies around the country. Number 5, we have a series of domestic intelligence agencies that function within our various federal departments. Department of State, Treasury, Energy, things like that. So at the Department of State, we have the Bureau of Intelligence and Research. And what they do is they gather intelligence from activities going on around the world, and they produce reports with it. They pay close attention to issues that are going on in other countries that might in some way undermine the objectives of the United States in that country. Basically, if there is something that might interfere with our interference, the Bureau of Intelligence and Research at the State Department is going to be working on that. They are supposed to track things like the trafficking of weapons or drugs or people. But for some reason, they never get around to producing reports on the CIA's role in all of that dirty business. This is the agency that advises the Secretary of State, who's the head of the State Department. So it was this agency through which Hillary Clinton was doing a lot of her under-the-table stuff back in Benghazi, Libya. All right, number 6, the next agency is the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis. Now, those of you old enough to remember 9/11, after 9/11, the neocons created the Department of Homeland Security, which was really for the purpose of helping to transition America from a free nation to a police state. That's essentially what they've done. This is the department that is in charge of things like beating us up at border crossing checkpoints, and they are in charge of grabbing our genitals at the airport. So this Office of Intelligence and Analysis, they collect information on perceived domestic threats. And what they do is they disseminate this information to state governments through its network of so-called fusion centers. Then we have the Department of Energy. They have a spy department called the Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. Originally, what they were working on was back from the time of the Manhattan Project on. These guys were working on monitoring the nuclear activities and programs of the Soviet Union. But since the fall of the Soviet Union, they have just greatly expanded the work of their agency to where they investigate any kind of nuclear activities around the world. Number 8 is the U.S. Treasury Department's, they've actually got 2 spy groups. The Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, and within that, as a subgroup, is the Treasury's Office of Intelligence and Analysis. So the work that I did when I was a financial crimes investigator for the bank was very similar to this kind of stuff, though I had far less resources than these guys do. So this is work related to watching for illegal financial activities related to drugs, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, financing of terrorism, money laundering, watching charities, for example, some of these Islamic charities that launder money. That's what they do. The ninth agency, we start to get into the various intelligence agencies that are related to the Defense Department and the U.S. military, and there's quite a few of these. The Pentagon's top spy agency is the DIA, or the Defense Intelligence Agency. Very big, very big. These guys spy on foreign militaries to assess their strengths, their weaknesses, and the problem is this intelligence that they gather, it is shared with both military and civilian leaders and foreign policymakers. So the Defense Intelligence Agency really is a major player in the military-industrial complex, because a lot of what they come up with kind of determines what the military industry needs to be producing to address whatever those perceived threats are. And like the CIA, this Defense Intelligence Agency operates rendition centers around the world where they torture people to try to squeeze secrets out of them, and they have tortured people to death, for sure. Number 10 is this is like, I kind of imagine this bureaucracy, this intelligence system, as like some kind of a beast, like a great big octopus with a bunch of tentacles, except more than 8 tentacles. So this tentacle is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency conducts what's called geointelligence, geographic intelligence. They basically use satellites and global positioning systems to spy on geographical targets, which could be something like fighting forces on the ground, mobile transport units, or it could be fixed targets, something like if you saw those scenes, those photo ops of Obama and Hillary and the others in their room watching the feed of the compound in Pakistan where Osama bin Laden was supposedly at. Well, that is made possible through this agency. That's what they do. They gather this kind of intel. And another thing you should know about these guys is that they had a contract with Google to create Google Earth. So that's right, Google Earth really is a government spy project. Only what you and I see when we use Google Earth is much, much less in comparison to what these guys see, because they have the live feeds, the live satellite images. What we see pales in comparison in quality. They can zoom in and see the color of your eyes with these spy satellites. They watch our every move. Another spy agency that works with the Pentagon and the CIA is the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO. Like the other agency, the American people didn't even know this one existed. 31 years passed that this agency existed before it was declassified and the public was able to learn of its existence. I think it was 1992 that we learned about this. These people are in charge of global recon. They build and operate our spy satellites. They also do things like setting up early warning systems to detect missiles that are launched. Number 12, the Air Force has an intelligence branch called the Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. And the 25th Air Force uses things like drones and airplanes and satellites to find enemy targets, collect photos on them, and other intel for airstrikes and whatever. Number 13, Army Military Intelligence. This intelligence branch gathers intel and intercepts communications related to fighting on the ground, to the battlefield. Number 14 is the Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence. They conduct analysis to ensure naval readiness for war. They also track activity of merchant ships that may be transporting illegal materials. Number 15 is the Marine Corps Intelligence, and they basically do the same thing as Army Intelligence. These various military intelligence groups, they don't sound that bad. And, overall they aren't. But the problem is they're also connected to JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command. JSOC functions as a secret army under the control of the Commander-in-Chief. So what our presidents do is they send JSOC into places like Sudan and Somalia, places where they don't want the attention of the full military, but where we still need to wage some small wars. That's what they do. They send them in there, they kill foreign leaders, they overturn governments. JSOC plays a big role in the military actions of the deep state. And I've even gotten a personal message of gratitude from an attorney who represents the government of Somalia, because government officials had seen one of my exposés on secret JSOC operations there in their country, in Somalia, that was being coordinated with the CIA, carrying out drone strikes and everything. I had lots of intel that I put out on that operation. Number 16, we come to Coast Guard intelligence, which is part of the U.S. military. They gather intel to protect the thousands and thousands of miles of U.S. coastlines from ships that may be trying to bring in illegal drugs or weapons and things like that. Of course, we don't really need the Coast Guard, or naval intelligence for that matter, because we've got crowdsource the truth to sound the alarm if anyone tries to bring things like dirty bombs into American ports, right? Sorry, I couldn't resist. All right, now we get to the last of the 17 agencies that I'll mention, and that's the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. This office was created after 9/11, primarily because despite having all of these different intelligence agencies, the problem was they would not cooperate. One group would get information but not share it with another, and so things were falling through the cracks. All kinds of bad activities happen because these agencies have turf wars and they don't cooperate. So the job of the Director of the National Intelligence, this agency, is to coordinate the intelligence gathering and sharing between the 17 agencies. So the current director is Daniel Coates, and the director serves as the principal intelligence advisor to whomever is president at the time. So these are the primary military and intelligence agencies within the deep state. But let me remind you of what I said in part 1. There is a difference between the deep state and the shadow government. The shadow government is the cabal of cryptocrats who run the show. The deep state, and what they do is completely contrary to the law of the land. They are unelected, they are evil. They are motivated by greed and power. And the deep state, however, this is the apparatus that is controlled, that is utilized by these shadow government operatives. And the deep state quite often operates perfectly within the bounds of the law. But the problem is that many of these agencies that I mentioned, they cooperate with military and industries, with corporations. They do business with many of our politicians, and they corrupt our political process through the injection of big money into everything. They use this money to manipulate how our members of Congress will vote for things like how to spend money on defense contracts, the business of war, and things like that. And inseparably linked to all of these various military and intelligence agencies, like I said, are those corporations that get business contracts to develop things like satellites and missile systems, hardware, software. This is a $1 trillion a year industry. And lobbyists from these various war corporations What they do is they pay visits to our representatives in the House and in the Senate, and they bribe them. They don't hand them money directly, but there's other ways that you can bribe somebody. Congressman, we believe it is in the interest of national security for you to vote to award that $100 billion weapons contract to us here at General Dynamics. Now, of course, we don't expect you to make a decision on this now. We need to have more meetings to discuss this with you in a more private setting. So we'd like for you to come to our business offices. We have one, say, we've got some private villas in the Cayman Islands. Perhaps you could join us there to conduct this discussion. And of course, since this is a business meeting, we'll make sure and fly you there on our private jet. And of course, we'll cover any necessary expenses related to this trip. See, these military-industrial complex corporations, they wine and dine our legislators, giving them junkets and other perks. And so it's no surprise at all that when these congressmen get done doing all this dirty work for these corporations, when they retire, what's waiting for them? Multi-million-dollar lobbying jobs at the very corporations that they have been helping while in office. And that happens over and over and over and over again. And I want you guys to watch this. We know that Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, is retiring. Kind of bizarre. Why would he be retiring? He says he's leaving Congress so he can spend more time with his family. Well, I've got a dollar that says that within a year of retirement, Paul Ryan is going to be working as a lobbyist for a major corporation that he has done business with. Let's check back on this in a year from now and see if I'm right, or year after he's out of office. You see, we have people here in the United States that are trying to get Congress to do something, to do different things that are good for us, the people, to meet the needs of the people. But we are competing against these multinationals to get the attention of our congressmen. Now, not all, but many, in fact, I'd say most of the people who end up running for federal office, they're already very wealthy and they are very, very ambitious. Tons of the people in Congress were attorneys. So when these kinds of people end up in office and are given a choice between, say, helping constituents and in return getting thanks and respect as payment from the constituents, or they can go over here and help multi-million-dollar corporations, these multinationals, and they can get luxurious perks now and multi-million-dollar salaries later. Let's see, do I want the praise of grandma, or do I want to be a multi-millionaire? Tough decision, right? For these people, real tough decision. All right, now who is paying these people? Who is bribing our congressmen? Right now in the United States, there are just over 1,900 private defense industry corporations. Corporations that are making money off the business of war. And in addition to these, there are some that are based in other countries that happen to do most of their business with the U.S. government. During Donald Trump's first year in office, because of his escalation of global warfare, this military industry saw a 3.6 increase in profits. Now, how much money do they make? The top 100 companies, just the top 100 out of that 1,900, top 100 raked in $364.8 billion in a year. I think that was in 2016. But out of those 100 companies, 74% of the revenue was generated just by the top 25. And out of that, the top 10 companies were responsible for 54% of the total revenue from the defense industry. So the top 10 are the heavy hitters. Who are these people? Who are these defense contractors? Let's run through them real quick. Number 10, United Technologies. In 2013, arms sales totaled $11.6 billion. They have a workforce of nearly 200,000 people. This is the company that makes Black Hawk helicopters, along with a wide range of arms. Number 9 is L3 Communications. They made $12.5 billion in arms sales with a workforce of about 61,000. They do business in electronic systems, national security systems, command, control, communications, surveillance, all that kind of stuff. Number 8 is Finmeccanica. They are, I believe, Italian. I think that's an Italian-based company. They've got a workforce of over 70,000, and their arms sales totaled $14.6 billion. This company got in trouble back in 2010. They got caught paying bribes to government officials in India to try and secure a $750 million contract to build military helicopters for India. All right, number 7 is EADS, which stands for the European Aeronautic Defense and Space Company. They have $16.4 billion in arms sales, workforce of 133,000 people. And these guys build aircraft, electronics, missiles, and also space-based technology. Now we get down to number 6. We're starting to get to the biggest hitters here. Northrop Grumman, $21.4 billion in arms sales. They employ 72,500 workers. Do you guys remember back during my Vegas investigation that I had learned long before it was publicly announced that Stephen Paddock had visited an arms dealer or an arms salesman near Phoenix, Arizona? He went there and picked up weapons and drove back, right, just before the Vegas shooting. Well, the man that sold those weapons to him, to the incendiary rounds and everything, that was Douglas Haig. Douglas Haig had a top security clearance from the Department of Defense while working for this contractor, Northrop Grumman. So Grumman makes things like aircraft, missiles, electronics, all the usual stuff. Number 5 is Raytheon. $21.4 billion in arms sales, 72,000 employees. This is one of the largest U.S. defense contractors. These guys make things like Tomahawk cruise missiles, so Trump can shoot them at the people in Syria. Number 4 is General Dynamics, and I like this one, and I'll tell you why in a second. $22.5 billion in sales, 71,000 employees. These guys make Tomahawk cruise missiles as well. If any of you watched, this is the reason I kind of like them. Not seriously, but I was a big fan of the sci-fi series Fringe. I enjoyed watching that. And if any of you guys watched it, there is a giant evil corporation at the center of all the things going on called Massive Dynamic. So yes, General Dynamics was the inspiration for that evil corporation. General Dynamics truly is evil. Number 3, BAE Systems. They made $29.2 billion in arms sales with 93,500 workers. They sell things like L-Rod bar armor systems that shield defense vehicles. I don't really understand all of it, but that's what they do. Number 2 is Boeing. That's right. Boeing doesn't just make commercial airplanes. They had $31.8 billion in arms sales, 171,000 employees. They are the second largest U.S. government contractor. These guys make strategic missile systems, laser systems, global positioning systems, all kinds of space-based technologies. And then we get to number 1, which is Lockheed Martin. In 2013, Lockheed had $36.3 billion in arms sales, 123,000 employees. Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock worked for Lockheed before its merger. And I should say, because I know people are going to jump on me, alleged Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock worked for Lockheed, or its predecessor before it merged together. And Lockheed makes missiles and unmanned systems, all kinds of stuff. And CIA whistleblower Ken Shipp, who I know some of you have watched, he pointed out that Lockheed is the chief surveillance information processor for the CIA, for the NSA, and for the FBI. Lockheed creates this, they created this surveillance program that tracks our phone calls, tracks our emails. It even tracks when you go to the post office and drop off a piece of mail or any mail that passes through the post office. And I don't know if you guys know this, it gets scanned. The outside of the envelope with your return address, anything that you send, a digital scan is made of every single piece of mail in America, and it is stored in a massive database. They track everything we do. This program is so massive, so expensive, that it is estimated to cost an average of $260 a year for every single individual living in America. Huge, huge, huge program. So like I said, we have got hundreds of these companies, and they are interlinked, joined at the hip with our congressmen. And you know why your congressman doesn't really care a whole lot about what you think? It's because people like me and you may donate $20 to his re-election, but what's that compared to the war industry corporation like Lockheed Martin that's putting $800,000 into that congressman's political action committee that's going to get that guy reelected? So money from the war industry has robbed the American people of our representatives. And if I researched it, I would assume that's the case in other countries as well, like the UK. When President Dwight Eisenhower gave his famous speech, you know, the one about the dangers of the military-industrial complex, I watched an interview with his son who was talking about how his dad wrote that speech and what was on his mind. One of the things that his son said is that in the early drafts of that speech, he didn't call it the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower called it this conspiracy. He called it the military-industrial congressional complex. But Eisenhower took the word congressional out of this speech. He thought maybe it would be too offensive, come across too combative. But the idea that the United States Congress is linked to this war for-profit industry was very much his concern, and it does come out in the speech. Well, let me read just a couple of lines from General Eisenhower's 1961 farewell speech. He said this, quote, "Our military organization today bears little relation to that known by any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But now we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security more than the net income of all other United States corporations. This conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that the security and liberty so that security and liberty may prosper together. Excuse me. You see, Eisenhower saw what was happening, and he saw it happening rapidly. All of this really started building up after World War II. Rather than disband once the war was over, the war industry kept producing because there was profit to be made. The problem, of course, is that you have the issue of supply and demand. If you don't have a market demand for a product or a service, your profits are going to go down because you have nobody to sell to. Sometimes the company will completely disappear. So Eisenhower saw this, and naturally his concern was that this new defense industry would secure its own continuing existence, perpetuate itself through its influence over the U.S. government, that would get its hooks into congressmen and create a perpetual justification for the defense industry. He said that while America needs to be able to defend itself, sure, still the monetizing of war could lead to disaster for our country. And so the people needed to remain alert and vigilant. But apparently we weren't vigilant enough. And today the war industry has taken control of the wallets of the U.S. taxpayer. Just look at what President Trump signed into law earlier this year, a record-breaking $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, which included $700 billion in defense spending, with at least another $716 billion next year. This bill that was presented to Congress to vote on was 2,232 pages long. And do you know how long the congressional leadership allowed members of Congress to read and research this 2,000 pages before they had to vote on it? Less than 24 hours. They would have had to have been able to read nonstop for 24 hours, 150 pages per hour, to be able to go through this bill that had been secret up until that time. Now, guys, I believe in having a strong national defense. Of course, having a military that is the most powerful in the world is in our interests. And so I believe in things like paying our troops a fair wage for their work. But that is not what all of this was about. This was a gigantic gift to the military-industrial complex. These corporations and their puppets in Congress, hundreds of billions of dollars. And here in my own home state of North Carolina, we've got one of the biggest puppets of the military-industrial complex in the entire Congress, Senator Richard Burr. He's the head of the Senate Committee on Intelligence. He's a proud puppet of the New World Order. Just ask him. He's also a member of the Senate Weapons of Mass Destruction Caucus, and, I kid you not, Senator Burr is a member of the Congressional Boating and Sportsmen's Caucuses. Well, thanks, Dick. You do us all proud here in North Carolina. So, setting all of that aside, if we look at this money, if we look at what these war corporations that lobby our government do, what they do to men like Senator Richard Burr and other congressmen who give these sweet deals, you have to start wondering, how is America going to use all of these weapons? Because we are buying far, far more weapons from the defense industry than we have use for. So what are we going to do with all of these freaking weapons? Well, did you know that the United States is the greatest global arms trafficker in history? We sell weapons to other countries such as Saudi Arabia so that the Saudis can use those weapons to commit genocide against the civilian population of Yemen, places like that. We give these weapons to Israel so that Israel can, go roll their tanks in and tear down Gaza and go into the West Bank and shoot people like nurses. Jared Kushner held meetings with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to broker a deal for Donald Trump. Trump gave the Saudis the biggest arms deal in world history. An arms package worth $350 billion. Ask yourself, even if you're a Trump supporter, was Donald Trump selling all of these weapons to help protect America? Well, considering that Trump knows for a fact that Saudi Arabia helped to finance the 9/11 attacks against the American people, and given that Trump knows for a fact that the Saudis were and are financing ISIS, I hardly think that Donald the deal maker was wheeling and dealing for my benefit or yours. Donald Trump is nothing more than the public face of the military-industrial complex. He is the swamp. He is working to make these corporations filthy, stinking rich off of warfare. If President Eisenhower can see what we have in the White House right now, I suspect he is probably rolling in his grave. And of course, it's the Zionist bankers on Wall Street, as well as the Federal Reserve, that are financing much of this business, which is a topic that I'm going to save to do a totally separate video on. It's an entire series unto itself. There is so much more that we could discuss related to the deep state. We could go on talking about all the many aspects of the deep state for days and days, but the mind can only retain what the rear end can endure. So I'm going to close this series for now. I hope that during these 2 to 3 hours, you have been able to gain some greater insight into how the deep state functions, what the connections are, how the shadow government uses the deep state to accomplish their dirty agendas around the world. War is a racket, as Smedley Butler once famously said. It is a racket. I ask you, my viewers, when Donald Trump announces that America needs to go to war again, whether with Iran or North Korea or Djibouti or whatever place the New World Order wants to knock off next, I want you to stop. And I want you to remember the lessons from this series. Remember that if those other parties, those other nations, are not attacking us, then you can bet this is not a war of self-defense that Trump is pushing, but a war for money for the military industry, for the defense contractors, for the Wall Street bankers that make money off war, money for the politicians who are going to get their pockets lined with money from these companies, money for the puppet masters like the Rothschilds and their associates. Why do we keep, as a society, why do we keep supporting war after war after war? So many people say, not again. I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to support war again. I was tricked. I fell for the propaganda about Iraq. I'll never fall for that propaganda again. I've seen the light. Oh, Trump wants to attack North Korea? Yeah, we need to take them out before Kim Jong-un nukes us. Oh, Iran? Oh, yeah, they want to destroy Israel. We got to go destroy them. Syria? Gas attack? Oh, yeah, let's bomb. Let's drop those bombs. You got to watch for the propaganda. You've got to know that they are selling propaganda. Say no to war. Hashtag not in my name. But I know that most of you who are my viewers do understand the situation. I know that most of you out there, the vast majority of my viewers, are keyed into what's really going on. And I love that. I love that I have such an informed audience. Most of what I say is not even new information. I'm preaching to the choir. You and I have an uphill battle in fighting back against these criminals. But that doesn't matter. It is a battle worth waging. This is a fight we must wage, even if we are not, even if it doesn't look like we're winning. because we never know when a series of events could swing things in our favor, even if only temporarily. So we need to be ready when that happens. Don't get caught flat-footed. Keep up the pressure. Do as Eisenhower counseled. Remain alert, remain knowledgeable, and spread that knowledge by sharing these videos. Folks, if you found this series informative, this is a collaborative effort. I would very much appreciate your financial support of my work. I make these videos for free, of charge to the public, put them out there for everybody. So I rely on the generosity of people like you to keep this channel going. In the video description, you'll find my cryptocurrency wallet addresses if you want to donate that way. You can send a donation to Jake Morphonios, P.O. Box 1333, Kernersville, North Carolina, 27285. Donations can be made online at patreon.com/endtimesnewsreport or paypal.me/endtimesnewsreport. Thank you guys so much for watching. And thank you for caring enough about the truth to learn about these uncomfortable topics. I mean, you could easily be watching music videos or something like that instead. Thank you for taking the time. We need more citizens like you guys who take such an interest in things that are of so much importance to our country. Thank you all so much. Take care. God bless. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.